Have you ever heard of a building designed for murder? A place where trapdoors led to secret chutes, where gas chambers were hidden in plain sight, and where a charming, brilliant doctor was the architect of it all. Welcome to the dark heart of 19th century America, and the story of one of its first and most infamous serial killers, H. Holmes. As Chicago prepared to dazzle the world with the 1893 World's Fair, one man was quietly constructing a labyrinth of death. His name was Herman Webster Mudgett, but the world would come to know him as H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City. He was a master of deceit, a swindler, a bigamist, and a cold-blooded killer. His list of crimes stretched from insurance fraud to horse theft, but his most horrifying acts took place inside a building that newspapers would later call the Murder Castle. While he was convicted for one murder, he confessed to 27. And though many of his confessions were lies, the true number of his victims remains a chilling mystery. So, who was this man, and how did he turn the American dream into a waking nightmare? Herman Webster Mudgett was born in 1861 in a small New Hampshire town. By all accounts, he was exceptionally intelligent, graduating with honors at just 16. But his childhood was far from perfect. His father was a heavy drinker known for his harsh discipline. At school, his smarts made him a target for bullies. In one incident that would foreshadow his future, his classmates tried to scare him by forcing him to touch a real human skeleton. But instead of fear, he felt a strange fascination. This moment ignited a dark curiosity. He started dissecting animals, his interest in anatomy growing more and more obsessive. This fascination led him to medical school, first at the University of Vermont, then at the University of Michigan. It was here that his moral compass truly shattered. He worked in the anatomy lab, where part of his job was to procure cadavers for dissection, often by robbing graves. He quickly realized he could use these bodies for something else: insurance fraud. He would take out policies on fictional people, use a stolen cadaver to fake a death, and then collect the money. Even before he graduated, Holmes was already treating human life as a commodity, a tool for his own enrichment. This was just the beginning. In 1886, he arrived in Chicago and adopted the now infamous alias, H. Holmes. He was charming and handsome, easily landing a job at a drugstore. Before long, he had convinced the owner to sell him the business. Then, he bought a vacant lot across the street and began construction on a 3-story building that would become his personal playground of horror. He was meticulous in his deception, constantly hiring and firing construction crews, so no one person understood the building's true, nightmarish layout. On the surface, it looked like a hotel, perfectly timed to open for the World's Fair, but inside it was a maze. Hallways twisted and turned, leading to brick walls. Staircases went nowhere. Rooms were built without windows, and some were even lined with soundproof padding and fitted with gas pipes connected to his personal control room. He had chutes that dropped from the upper floors directly to the basement, where he'd installed a dissection table and a massive furnace. While the newspapers of the time loved to sensationalize the details, even Holmes himself admitted to using the building for his dark experiments. He tested how long people could survive in airtight vaults and experimented with chloroform and gas. Soon, people connected to him began to disappear. His first known victims were Julia Smythe, an employee with whom he was having an affair, and her young daughter, Pearl. On Christmas Eve in 1891, they both vanished without a trace. Holmes gave conflicting stories, first claiming Julia had left town, then later admitting she died during a botched abortion he performed. Not long after, he hired a new secretary, Emmeline Sigrand. She, too, disappeared. Months later, a skeleton matching her description was found, having been sold by Holmes to a local physician. The pattern continued. He lured a young actress named Minnie Williams into his web, convincing her to sign over a valuable property to him. When her sister Nanny came to visit, both women disappeared forever. Holmes was a predator who used charm as his bait. He would seduce, deceive, and when his victims were no longer useful, he would eliminate them. The list of the missing grew longer and longer, a trail of ghosts left in his wake. But Holmes didn't work entirely alone. He found a partner in crime, a carpenter and fellow con artist named Benjamin Petezel. Together, they planned their biggest scam yet, faking Patezel's death to collect a $10,000 life insurance policy. Holmes promised Patezel he would simply find an unidentifiable body to use as a stand-in, but Holmes had a more sinister plan. He traveled to Philadelphia, where he murdered Patezel for real, using chloroform before setting the body on fire to make it look like an accident. He then collected the entire insurance payout for himself. But his cruelty didn't end there. He went to Patezel's unsuspecting widow, claiming her husband was still alive and in hiding. He offered to help reunite the family. Under this pretense, he took custody of 3 of Patezel's 5 children: Alice, Nellie, and Howard. What followed was a horrifying journey across the northern United States and into Canada, as Holmes dragged the children from city to city, all while sending reassuring letters to their mothers. But the children were never seen alive again. A determined detective named Frank Gayer began to trace Holmes' steps, uncovering a trail of horror. The bodies of Alice and Nellie were eventually found buried in the cellar of a Toronto rental home. Little Howard's charred bone fragments were discovered in a chimney in a house Holmes had rented in Indianapolis. The man who was supposed to be their protector had become their executioner. Holmes' elaborate web of lies finally began to unravel. He was arrested in Boston in November 1894, initially on a warrant for horse theft in Texas, but the law was closing in. As investigators searched his infamous Chicago castle, they found horrifying evidence: bone fragments, a dissection table covered in dried blood, and vats of acid. The press exploded with sensational headlines, branding the building a house of horrors. Holmes was put on trial for the murder of Benjamin Patezel. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. While awaiting his execution, he sold his confession to the newspapers for a hefty sum, leaving a tale of 27 murders. But true to form, many of his claims were lies. Several people he claimed to have killed were later found alive and well. He was a manipulator to the very end. On May 7, 1896, H.H. Holmes was hanged. His neck didn't snap, and he reportedly struggled for over 15 minutes before he died. Fearing that his own body would be stolen for dissection, just as he had done to so many others, he requested to be buried 10 feet deep in a casket filled with concrete. His story, however, didn't end with his death. The murder castle itself mysteriously burned down shortly after his execution and was finally demolished in 1938. Today, a post office stands in its place. Over a century later, in 2017, authorities exhumed his grave to confirm it was really him. Inside the concrete shell, they found his body remarkably well preserved. DNA tests confirmed it. The devil in the White City had been in his grave all along. The story of H. Holmes is a chilling reminder that monsters are not always lurking in the shadows. Sometimes they are intelligent, charming, and build their castles right in front of us, hiding their evil in plain sight. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest chapters. We'll see you in the next video.